Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Demai, chapter 7, Halacha 8. This is the final part of meseket Demai. This is the last halacha, and this is in the dedication of my father-in-law who just passed away, Rabbi Pinchas Hai ben Malka, and he worked very hard to raise 11 children. 7 of the boys, 7 boys and 4 girls, and 7 of the boys are avrachim who learn full time. And one of the things that he did was to make sure that Torah and learning is a central value in the home. And we can always learn from the zakenim, all of the old people, and certainly get inspiration from people who did it right in their lifetime and get some ideas on how to do things in our lifetime. So this Mishnah is going to talk about, it's a really fascinating Mishnah and a fascinating set of gemaras, and we're dealing with uncertainty. And in this Mishnah, we're dealing with barrels that were designated as Meiser Rishon, so it means that they have some sort of tithe taken out, but we don't know which barrel it is. And the Mishnah is going to deal with 5 cases. The Gemara is going to do something a little different. It's going to talk about really, the ideal way to fix the 5 cases where you have this uncertainty. Now, obviously, what the Gemara is going to be talking about, what's the best way? Go get other wine, and go get this other wine, and then fix these barrels. That's how it's ending off to tell you, this is the best way to do it. But what this Mishnah does, and there's no maloket about this Mishnah, this is talking about a way to fix it if you can't find other wine, but it is expensive. And that's why it's suggesting at the very end, in the Gemara, just go get other wine. And then it gets into another topic that for math people is going to be really interesting. It's dealing with issues of double uncertainty. Why do we have uncertainty in the first place? Well, we have Meiser Rishon, so tithe has been taken out, it's been partially rectified, but we don't know which barrel. And then the second case of uncertainty is going to be Suffolk Tuma. We know that with wine and Kohanim, that there's an issue about things being Demai and tahor. And over here, we're going to be dealing about a case where you have Meiser Rishon, but you don't know which barrel it's going to be in, and you suspect that a couple of the barrels are Demai, but you don't know which ones they are. So double uncertainty, and you see this in mathematics a lot. You see this with a lot of statistical things. They call it double blind testing and things like that, where there's ways to try to deal with uncertainty and mistakes and things like that. We're going to get into that, but this is going to be the Talmudic form of it. So very interesting. And the Mishnah is going to deal with the first of these 5 cases, and it's going to say, if someone had a wine cellar of 10 parallel rows, so imagine that they're casks of wine, or today you could imagine bottles of wine, but casks of wine, and, it's a wine cellar, and why would you be buying such, large quantities of wine? Well, you want to make sure you have wine for Shabbat, and maybe you have a vineyard there, and you produce a lot, and you have wine for a few years, because you have new wine and old wine, and wine will last a while. So you're dealing with a vineyard, or you're dealing with some wealthy people, and we're dealing with the mathematics of this. That's why we care about it. So we're dealing with 100 barrels to make it easy. It's going to be 10 rows by 10 rows. So you imagine you stacked up 10 barrels in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you went across and you did another 10. So we have 10 by 10. That's the cases we're dealing with for these 5 cases. So the first case says if someone had a wine cellar of 10 parallel rows, and each consisting of 10 barrels of wine, and he said the outer row is designated as Meiser Rishon, but it's not known which of the 4 outer rows he designated. So basically he knows for certain that he designated an outer row as Meiser Rishon, but he forgot which one it is. Or it could be known for certain that the owner designated one of the 4 out of rows, but he's not alive to ask him which one it is. So accordingly, all 4 outer rows are open to doubt of being Meiser Rishon. And it's this uncertainty itself that would not pose a problem, because Meiser Rishon itself has no sanctity and it can be consumed by everybody for Demai. Therefore, the owner can satisfy his financial obligation to the Levi by giving him any of the 10 barrels, and he may keep the remainder for himself. However, and this is going to be the note in the Art Scroll on page 76b1, however, the Meiser Rishon, says the Art Scroll, must always be tithed by separating from its 1/10 as Trumas Meiser, or else it remains tevel and it may not be consumed by everyone. And furthermore, Truma Meiser may be consumed only by a Kohen who is tahor, and consequently, the owner of the wine must find a way of removing the Truma Meiser from this storeroom before he's permitted to use any of the other ones that are possible Meiser. So, as we're seeing in this case of the Mishnah, we're dealing with a case where the owner has no other Meiser Rishon available to use as Truma Meiser besides that which is designated in this set of barrels. So, it's very easy. You go get another set of barrels from another room and you can go fix everything, but that's not the case here. So the case that we're dealing with over here is going to be that every barrel in this room is going to belong to both a horizontal row and a vertical row. For example, a barrel located in the northwest corner of this store of barrels can be considered either the leftmost barrel or the rightmost barrel or the northmost barrel, and the corner barrel can serve as Truma Meiser for some of these outer rows. So imagine, the Mishnah continues and he says, so we have this uncertainty, and somebody said, okay, there's Meiser Rishon here. It says one outer row is designated Meiser Rishon. And the Gemara says, Mishnah says, but it's not known which of the 4 rows it is that he designated. And it says he should take 2 barrels from diagonally opposite corners and designate them as Trumas Meiser. So in doing this, the Mishnah's stating that he should designate 2 diagonally opposite corner barrels. And in other words, if you imagine you're taking out on the very ends, and in this way he'll be sure that he separated out Truma Meiser from the actual Meiser row, no matter which of the outer rows contains only the Meiser, by giving away only 2 barrels. And so the idea here, says the Tiferet Yisrael, is that since he's unsure which barrel it is that actually has the Truma Meiser inside of it, and that, by the way, he has to give to a Kohen, over here, since the Kohen is in reality entitled to only one of them, he may sell one of them to a Kohen for the price of Truma. And why? Because price of Truma is always going to be cheaper than the price of regular produce. So the owner ends up getting a small loss because of the reduced price for this other barrel. So what it's saying is you take, because there's 100 barrels, and he designated a row. And so what do you have as a row? You have 4 rows. You have the top row of 10. You have the bottom row of 10. You have the leftmost row of 10. You have the rightmost row of 10. So which one of these rows of Meiser Rishon has the Truma Meiser inside of it? Well, it says take the diagonal. It means take the corner topmost row to the top left and to the bottom right. That way you have the 2 diagonals. So whichever one of these 10, whether it's going to be the line that goes from left to right at the top, or the line that's going to go left to right at the bottom of this 100, or vertically up and down from the rightmost, or the up and down row from the leftmost, since you have the corner at the upper left and the corner of the bottom right, for sure you have in there the Truma Meiser from one of these rows, even though you're not sure which row it can be. Again, it can be either the horizontal row or the vertical row. You're not sure, but that diagonal run exists in both the horizontal and the vertical. So for sure, you did it. What do you do with the extra barrel? Well, you have to sell it to the Kohen at a reduced price because, again, you're going to be having this extra barrel that you have to designate out just in case. How do you recuperate value out of it? You sell it to the Kohen at a reduced price. You're taking a loss, but that's the best you can do. The second case goes like this. If he said half of an outer row, by the way, all these cases deal with 10 rows of 10. So if he said half of an outer row is designated as Meiser Rishon, but he doesn't know which of the half of the outer row he designated, so he basically is designating now like 5 in a row, but he doesn't know which one it is. The Mishnah says he should take 4 barrels and 4 barrels from the 4 corners and designate them as Trumas Meiser. So he took out 5 barrels from a row. Now, which 5 is it? Is it going to be the first part of the first row at the top going left to right? Or is it going to be the second part going left to right on the top part? Is it going to be the first 5 of the bottom barrel set going left to right? Or is it going to be the second set of 5 going left to right? Or is it going to be the first set of 5 going up and down on the leftmost side? Or is it going to be the bottom 5 that's going up and down? Same case for the right side. Which of these 5 it is? And so basically what it's saying is, since the Truma Meiser exists in one of these sets, you take 1 off for each corner. In other words, you're taking off 4 barrels here. You take off the leftmost barrel in the upper right. You take the rightmost barrel in the leftmost barrel in the upper left, the rightmost barrel in the upper right, the leftmost barrel in the bottom left, rightmost barrel in the bottom right. And that way you can be sure that definitely one of these barrels for sure is covering the real Trumas Meiser that's actually in what was designated. And what do you do with the 3 that are left over? 1 is real. 1 is going to go to the Kohen by right. He gets it by right. You have to give it to him. It's a gift. It's a Kohanic gift. You give it to him. You can't sell it to him. You give it to him. But the 3 that are there, you can't use it. And so what do? You sell it to the Kohen at the price of Truma. It's a loss. The third case, if he said 1 row is designated as Meiser Rishon, but it's not known which row he designated, it says that he should take 1 diagonal row and designate it as Truma Meiser. So this, again, you have 10 rows by 10 rows, 10 by 10. And he designated one of these rows. Maybe it's the thirdmost row. Maybe it's the fourthmost row. Maybe it's the row in going, up and down, that's the 8th-most row. Or maybe it's the one going up and down, that's the 9th-most row. So you don't know if it's going to be the row that's going left to right. You don't know if it's the row that's going to be going up and down. It's just one of the rows. It's definitely designated which one in it has the Truma Gedola. How do you get the right one to go to the Kohen? You make a line that goes all the way across from a diagonal. And so basically what you're doing is you take the uppermost row on the upper left, and you take the diagonal that goes to the end of this rectangle, and you draw a line going into the rectangle. Effectively what you're doing is you're drawing this line so you have two triangles, right? So imagine if you have a square and you draw from the uppermost left part of the square to the bottommost right part of the square, and you make 2 triangles. Well, that line that you made to make those 2 triangles, to split up that square, that's what you're going to designate out. Why is that? Well, it covers each one of the rows, whether it's going to be left or right or up and down, and you're covering each one of those barrels. So there is, certainly one is going to be real, but, since the entire row of 10 barrels is designated as Meiser Rishon and only 1 barrel is required, the minimum number of barrels he has to remove to cover this is going to be 10 barrels. So he's going to take out 10 barrels, and basically what he's going to do, 1 he has to give to the Kohen, and 9 he gets to sell to the Kohen at a discounted price. So again, that's going to be a big loss as well. And then we get to the next case, And the next case says like this. The fourth case, it says, if he said half the row is designated as Meiser Rishon, but it is not known which half row he designated, he should take 2 diagonal rows and designate out the Trumas Meiser from each of them. And if you imagine you have a square, basically what you're going to be doing is drawing a line from the upper left, just like we did before in the third case, to the bottom right to split it into 2 triangles. And then what you should do is you should draw another line from the upper right to the bottom left and draw another line across that square to create 4 triangles. You now have 4 triangles. So across that, when you just did it one time, you had 10 barrels. And when you do it the second time, you have 20 barrels. So only one of this is the real barrel of the Truma Meiser. You're not sure which it is. You give one to the Goan, and then the other 19 you have to sell to the Goan as a loss. The fifth case goes like this. It says, if he said 1 barrel is designated as Meiser Rishon, but it is not known which of the 100 barrels he designates, he should take 1/10 of each and every barrel and designate it as Truma Meiser. In other words, what he should do is get some sort of container, and he should take out from each one of these, since each one of them has this in there, and he should take out from each and every barrel to designate it out. Now, this is going to be where he has, 100 times 1/10 of a barrel. It's going to be a total of 10 barrels as the possible Truma Meiser, and since only 1/10 of the barrel is going to be really Truma Meiser, he can only charge the Goan for the remaining 9 9/10 barrels. So it's a significant loss. Now, and it's a massive loss. You're losing most of the wine. So again, uncertainty can be expensive, and what is this teaching us? Well, you better keep track of your tithes. You better keep track of how you do it. You better be careful. You better mark this stuff down. And in fact, that's actually what we saw. We see cases in the Shas where they're making marks on the containers so they know which tithe has been taken out. And that's how it was done and recorded in the Shas. That's how we'll go back to it. Because as you see, when it gets mixed up, it gets very complicated or very expensive. So in the Mishnah's second case, it was taught that if half an outer row is designated as Meiser, but it's not known which half row it is, again, it could be this set of 5 over here or this set of 5 over here, and it could also be this set of 5 going left or right or up or down, either on the most left or the most right. So it says that he should take the 4 corner barrels separated from Truma Meiser. And the Gemara wonders why the Mishnah did not suggest another way of dealing with the uncertainty, and that would be to take only 2 barrels to satisfy the Truma Meiser obligation. It says, in the second case of the Mishnah, let him just designate the rest of the row as Meiser and then just take 2 barrels for the Truma Meiser. Why? So what this is saying since the store consisted of 100 barrels of tevel and the 5 barrels of the half row originally was designated as the Meiser, then it's going to exempt 50 of them. But he still has to deal with another 5 barrels of Meiser for the remaining 50 barrels. So let him designate the Meiser now in the other half and deal with it that way. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Goan said in the name of the rabbis of Caesarea, the Mishnah is referring to a case where he'd already separated Meiser for half the barrels from somewhere else. And so this is, we know that you're taking out 10 barrels, right? It's 10%, okay? But we're talking about taking out 5. So they're explaining this Mishnah as saying only half this store of barrels remains tevel. And basically what this is saying is that, says the Mara Fulda, that he designated half the row as Meiser and the other half of the store, and it's from another place. And so since there's no tevel left in this store, he can't make use of just adding more Meiser. So in the first case, the Mishnah is talking about all 100 barrels will tevel, and there he took out a whole row of 10. In the second case, only 50 barrels are tevel. He's designating 5. Consequently, he designated the Meiser as 5 barrels. So Mishnah is referring to, says Chazan Ish in Demai 11:14, and is saying that the Mishnah is always referring to cases where the Meiser designated was the amount required to completely exempt the whole store, says the Chazan Ish. So so it's not talking about, the guy didn't know what he was doing and he took out, only half of what was required and half of its tevel. What this is trying to teach you is to say, no, the math is right, and this set only had 5 barrels to take out. Why? Because there was barrels from elsewhere, and he took out barrels from over here for over there. And what did he need to separate out an extra 5 barrels? He took it out from this store. In other words, it's like combining the two baskets that we've been dealing with. It just didn't mention that he's taking it from somewhere else, but the math is right. It's just that it's not mentioned, and that's why the Gemara is bringing this up. So obviously, the easiest way to deal with fixing all of this, or if you have something that's messed up, is to go get more wine from somewhere else and then add to it. But what this is trying to say is that the Mishnah's trying to suggest that it's trying to suggest that the student has to put in a little work and try to figure out how is it that this is going to be kosher, where it's talking about half, right? It's talking about 5 barrels instead of 10. We know that you have to have 10 to make it kosher. So what's going on here? And really, what it's trying to teach is, don't assume that it's not kosher. You should be smart about it and say, okay, well, I assume that it is kosher. How did he get only 5 that is a kosher thing? Well, he was taking out and adding barrels from elsewhere to effectively create it as if it was like 2 sets of barrels. And we were dealing with that sort of in an invisible way in the past 2 halachot, where we're dealing with 2 baskets of fruit, and certainly that's the implication here as well. So in relation to this Mishnah, the Gemara is going to cite a brisa that describes useful procedures to separate Trumas Meiser in other cases of doubt. And the Gemara says it was taught in a brisa if someone had before him 2 barrels of wine, one of which was Meiser Rishon, that was tevel, in regard to the Truma Meiser, and it was tahor. So again, we know that there's 2 tithes that have to come out, make sure that something is not going to be tevel. You have the Truma Gedola, and you have the second set to make sure it's going to be the Truma Meiser. Both go to the Goan, and you have to take out both to make sure something is not tevel. And this is dealing with a case where only the first one was taken out, and the Truma Meiser is still going to be there. So the Gemara said, and now you have this other double-blind sort of case of doubt. One of them is going to be Demai, one is going to be tahor, and one is going to be designated, one is not. So how do you deal with this double uncertainty here? So that's what it's trying to get at. And it's saying that, and one is going to be Meiser Rishon that was tevel, which means that Truma Meiser is not taken out, but it was Demai, and he does not know which barrel has the tahor wine, that's going to be and which one has the Demai wine. And also he doesn't know which one was going to have the tithes taken out and which one doesn't. And if he separates, here's the problem, right? If he separates the Truma Meiser from each barrel individually, like that's what the 5th case talks about, right? Like you have 1 barrel that was designated, and how would you have 1 barrel designated? Well, you have 9 barrels that were designated from another batch of wine in another room, right? So same case over here, you have the way that's fixed in the 5th case in the Mishnah. You just take out your bucket and you scoop out some of the wine from each barrel and you fix it, except one is going to be Demai, and that's a problem. So if he were to separate out the Truma from Meiser from each barrel, like in this 5th case, then the Goan is getting some containers of Truma Meiser that he's not allowed to drink. Why? It's Demai. He doesn't know which one it is. So to avoid this, the Gemara is going to explain how to deal with it. And it's going to say that he should bring 2 containers that are tahor, and he should take from this barrel an amount of wine enough for the Truma Meiser of both barrels and pour it into one of the containers. And likewise, from the barrel, an amount of wine enough for the Truma Meiser of both barrels and pour it into the second container. and then he should pick up one of the containers and say, if this is the tahor wine, then it is this one that I have now designated as Truma Meiser. But if it is not the tahor wine, then I have nothing. I've done nothing. And he does the same with the second container. So what he does is he's going to be doing like what the fifth case talks about, but he's basically going to be doubling the quantity. Because for sure he has to take out enough quantity. So what's he doing? He has to take out from each one. But he has to do it twice. Why? Because one is going to be definitely tamei and one is going to be definitely tahor. And he's basically saying if this one has the tahor wine in it, then this one is going to be designated. And if this one is going to have the tamei wine in it, it's going to be like he designated nothing. So the idea is that he's trying to have a container of wine from the barrel that is tahor. And really, you're talking about a case where he's ready to designate the Truma Meiser to separate it out. And he's going to try to explain, because you can't just take this out and give it to a Kohen because it might be tamei. He's not allowed to drink it. So you have to double the quantities. And basically what you're trying to do is to say that if the wine in this container is from the tamei barrel, and you're not sure which is the tamei barrel, then he's designated as Trumas Meiser. And then the wine becomes Truma Meiser only if it's tahor. And if it's tahor, it becomes Truma Meiser for both barrels, since it has enough wine for the Truma Meiser for both. And if it's, you're not allowed to designate, by the way, Truma Meiser that is tamei on behalf of Truma Meiser that's tahor. That, by the way, is in meseket Trumos. But you are allowed to separate Truma Meiser on something that is tahor on behalf of something that is tamei. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to separate that which is going to be tahor on behalf of what is tamei, and one of these barrels is going to have the right quantity. So what is this doing? This is making it conditional that if the wine is going to be in the second container, then the second container is going to either be tamei or tahor, and both barrels are going to consist of exempted meiser because you're over tithing it. And one is going to be rectified and free to consume, but one is not. And the barrel that has a tamei wine is going to be where, that's where the issue is going to be. So, the wine that came from the tamei barrel is going to be left undesignated, and it's going to remain ordinary meiser. It's going to be treated like hulin. But on the other hand, it's going to be where, the Kohen can't just go use it. And, it's tamei. So, as a result of doing this, where you're doubling the quantities, one container is going to contain the exempted meiser that is tamei, and the other is going to have the truma meiser that's tahor. And the Kohen can drink the wine from either container. However, one container actually has the real tamei wine, and the Kohen may not partake of truma after drinking tamei wine until he goes to the mikveh. But again, you don't know which it was, right? So you doubled the quantities, and maybe why do you double the quantities? To make sure that you're tithing also for the tamei one. But you don't know if the wine that you're drinking really was the tahor one. So really, you might have drunk the tamei one that's really tamei in heaven, right? And then you're going to try to do truma. Well, you can't, because you might have actually have uncertainty, or you might have actually had the one that is actually tamei. So you actually have to go to the mikveh first if you're a Kohen. And the Bryce is going to deal with this case where you actually have to go to the mikveh and, which one did you really drink? Maybe you really are tamei. Are you tamei or not? So this is going to come down to a maloket between Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And the Bryce continues and says, the Kohen drinks from one container, but he must immerse himself in a mikveh, and only then may he drink from the other container. These are the words of Rebbe. And Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, says he need not immerse himself into a mikveh only after he drank both containers. In other words, what he's saying, and it's going to explain this shortly, but Rabbi Elazar is saying that the person who drank the beverage where the status of the tuma is not known is definitely going to be tamei after he drank both of the beverages. But the case that Rebbe's talking about, Rebbe's of the opinion that he has to take into account the possibility that the first container was Demai and the second one was going to be the Truma. So once the Kohen drank from the Demai wine, he may not drink from the Truma without going to the mikveh first. So Rebbe's position is like this. He says, look, maybe the Demai wine was in the first batch, and you're not allowed to go drink the second one because that might actually be the real one that is actually going to be tahor Truma. So you have to go to the mikveh before you touch it. And that's why he's going to be saying you have to go to the mikveh first. Gemara explains the reason of both of these Tanaim and says, what is the reason for Rebbe? Says, because Rebbe says, I presume that perhaps he drank the Tamei beverage in the beginning. The first part was Tamei. And since he's Tamei, he can't take any Truma until he goes to the mikveh. So the Gemara is going to be continuing, and it's going to say, what is Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's reason? It says, because I say perhaps that he drank the Tamei beverage only at the end. And, why is he being lenient in not requiring the Kohen to immerse himself before drinking the second container? Maybe the first container was the Tamei one, and the second one is Truma, like what Rebbe's worried about. So what he's saying is, look, we're entitled to assume that the second container is the one that has the wine that's Tamei, and we don't need to take into account that the first wine was Tamei, because in Rabbi Lazar's opinion, only beverages that are definitely Tamei require the drinker to go to the mikveh. And in the case where the container is doubtful, maybe it has doubtful tuma, says Rabbi Kanievsky, he says, since the tuma that results from the drinking of Tamei beverages is only going to be rabbinic, the rabbis can permit this leniency. So really what Rabbi Elazar is saying, Rabbi Elazar's opinion is, look, this is only going to be doubtful tuma, and you only become Tamei on doubtful tuma. It's only going to be rabbinic. And so since it's rabbinic leniency on doubtful tuma on drinking this wine anyway, only after you drank both of them, did you maybe drink it? So it has a leniency. So go to the mikveh after. That's the idea. So the Gemara is going to question the above understanding of Rebbe's position, and Rebbe will make two statements about Tamei beverages that involve doubt. Rebbe's position is going to be saying like this. It says, surely all agree that if a Kohen drinks beverages that are definitely Tamei, then he becomes Tamei. And if he is forbidden, and then, certainly he's forbidden to eat even doubtful tuma until he immerses himself in a mikveh. So again, you have double uncertainty. This might be tuma, part of this wine might be truma, where it has sanctity, and also maybe, some of the wine is also going to be tamei. You just don't know which. And it might not be tamei. So, and also might not, be the right barrel that had the truma. So the Gemara says, beverages that are merely questionably tamei, surely everybody agrees that if someone drank them, he is then permitted to eat even produce that is certainly truma without going to the mikveh first. So basically what this is saying, look, perhaps because he only had questionable wine that was tamei, it's going to be rabbinically lenient. And so what's he saying is he's going to be allowed to, go have truma without the immersion. So how is it that, Rebbe's arguing this, right? So the Gemara is going to propose a new interpretation of this. It's going to say like this. It's going to say, rather, this is a case of which we speak in the Brisa. Case goes like this. The Kohen drank wine from both containers, but from one of them he drank less than a rivus. That's going to be the amount to count as drinking, by the way. And so, if you drink less than that, you don't become tamei because it's like you didn't drink. So Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, is holding that no immersion is necessary because Tuma is not certain. Rebbe disagrees, and he says like this. He says, what is Rabbi Lazar bar Shimon's reason? Gemara says, because it is only by virtue of the first container and by virtue of this second container that Tuma becomes certain. And certainly then does he require immersion in the mikveh. So the idea is that the Kohen needs to immerse himself in a mikveh only after he drinks from both containers, like what Rabbi Lazar is saying, because after he's done it, it's going to be certain that he drank the Demai wine. It's following that, he should immerse himself only after he drank enough wine to make sure that it's counting as drinking. So definitely more than a rivus. And in the case of what we're talking about, if he drank less than a rivus from each of the containers, he does not need to go to the mikveh, because again, it's less than that quantity, and also it's going to be a case of uncertainty. So when Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, stating in this brisa that immersion's only required at the end, it's meaning to say that it's only after you drank a rivus of wine from each container, and after you did it, for sure, the kohen is going to be Demai, and that's why he's saying it's at the end. So again, did he drink this in potential, or did he drink it in actuality? This case looks a lot like some cases between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, and he's saying in actuality, after you went through and drank both of them, you actually did have the Demai one, so go to the mikveh. Gemara is going to look at Rebbe's view, and Gemara says, what is Rebbe's reason? Why does he require the kohen to immerse himself first, even after drinking less than a rivus from one of the containers? And it says, so that he should not mistakenly come to drink a full rivus from both containers, and as an accident think that he's still tahor. So it's going to be like a fence. And so he's going to be saying that, Rebbe is going to be saying, yeah, okay, fine. If he drank less than a rivus, the worry is that, perhaps, he finishes the actual rivus from each one and thinks he's actually still Demai. And in Rebbe's opinion, the rabbis decreed that whenever a kohen drinks from both containers, he should be considered Demai even without drinking the required one, as a fence to safeguard, to make sure that he doesn't accidentally drink the full amount thinking he's tahor. So he might actually, drink the full amount of wine from the first one, say he's still tahor, because he might say, oh, well, maybe the Demai one is in the second one, and I'm still tahor. So now I'm going to drink half a rivus from the second one. Well, that would be an issue. So they're saying that, in general, having less than a rivus does not make you Demai. But the rabbis here, Rebbe's point is that they're worried that the drinker might make a mistake and come to drink the full amount, not realize his tuma, because the distinction between a full measure and a half measure, might be one where, maybe he makes a mistake, and it's not that much difference between, a half rivus and a rivus. So really what we're dealing with here is a case where you have two containers, one of them is Demai, and a person drinks from both of them. And in this case, if we were to tell the drinker that he's tahor after drinking from both containers, he might say that, oh, it's because maybe it's not really Demai. But really, why would it be? Because it has to do with how much he drank. And so you shouldn't be looking at this about doubtful tuma, about whether, maybe you can drink doubtful tuma and not worry about it. And really what this is saying is they're saying, like, look, if you're drinking any part of this and, forget about the measures, just go to the mikveh. And why are they doing it? Because we're dealing with amaratzim, and we're dealing with amaratzes. And issues about Demai and tahor is complicated. So they're saying, look, if you're drinking from any part of the container, in technicality, the law might really be like what Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, is saying. But the point of Rebbe is to say, no, they made a fence. And that's why it is the way it is. It's to protect the Amaretses from contaminating truma, and also from contaminating regular wine and making it Demai. So that's why they're saying, like, if you're drinking any amount, even a smaller amount than half a rivus, you have to go to the mikveh right away, because the Amaretz can't be trusted to deal with things about Demai and tahor. So even with things that are complicated about how much is a minimum quantity and things like that, so that you're going to be Demai or tahor, they're just saying it's a rabbinic thing, you go to the mikveh. That's the idea. So the Gemara questions this position and says, but does Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, not accept that, there's a concern that he may come to drink the full rivus, And it's logical that we're worried that there is going to be an error, especially with Amaretz not knowing, Tamei and Tahor, understanding how it works, and what about, what is a measure, and when can you become contaminated and when not. So why doesn't Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, also not require him to go to the mikveh after he just has even part of a rivus, like what Rebbe is saying is actually going to be a d'Rabbanan restriction? Halacha, by the way, goes by Rebbe, not by Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon. But we want to understand what Rabbi Lazar's position is. And because of this question, the Gemara is going to be rejecting this explanation. And basically what it says is, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, says, you do not have any reasonable explanation to dispute except for this original interpretation, namely that Rebbe is concerned that the Kohen may have drunk the Tamei beverages in the beginning, and Rabbi Lazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, is worried and presumes that he may have drunk the Tamei beverage at the end. And so basically what they're saying is they're not concerned that the wine of the first container may have become Tamei, because Tuma for drinking Tamei beverages is only going to be rabbinic. And we're going to treat doubt leniently. We're going to assume that the wine in the first container was the tahor wine. And really, as regards to Rabbi Lazar's leniency, he's lenient on this, by the way. He doesn't need to immerse himself until he has wine from both of them. And basically, he's saying that in regards to the case where the Kohen drank from both containers, Rabbi Lazar is basically understanding it as requiring immersion only if a rivus was drunk from each container. And the Gemara is establishing that Rabbi Lazar agrees with Rebbe's concern regarding someone who drinks from both containers. They both have the same concern. They're both, agreeing on it. So according to the Gemara's conclusion, Rabbi Lazar does require an immersion, even if he drank less than a rivus, even from the second container, but he has to at least drink from the second container. But Rabbi Lazar does not dispute that the rabbis put in this thing of, if you're even drinking a less than a rivus, we're still going to send you to the mikveh. The debate is going to be whether you're going to be putting it on drinking the first one or the second one. Rabbi Lazar is saying after you drank from the second one, even if the second one was half a rivus, as a d'Rabbanan rule, you have to go to the mikveh. And Rebbe is saying, no, even if you drank the first one, and it's less than a rivus, we're going to send you to the mikveh. And that concludes meseket Demai. And we're going to get into meseket kalayim. And we're going to get into some very exciting sugyas. Have a great day.